I recommend my patients, take their shoes off. They're walking on grass or dirt. You can ground, let's say, on the beach and the water, the beach. So there are different ways of grounding, but you put yourself in direct contact with the earth.
Welcome, Dr. Montgomery. Thank you so much for coming back to Staying Ageless. I'm really excited to talk to you again.
Thanks for having me. It's always good to talk to you, Celsa.
Yeah, you were actually one of my first guests on this podcast, and we've come a very long way. So I'm really excited to have you back again because I
I,
think you're a genius and
I
because
didn't
you
know
have
that. Thank you very
valuable.
much.
So I wanted to talk about earthing or grounding today, which a lot of people may have never heard of the term. Can you, I guess, just start off with from your experience and how you deal with clients? What is that? What is it?
Yeah, so I mean, earthing or grounding is very simple in concept. It's basically when you, as an individual, or as in my perspective, my patients, I get them in direct contact with the earth. In direct contact, I mean, I recommend my patients, take their shoes off. They're walking on grass or dirt. You can ground, let's say, on the beach. And in the water, the beach. So there are different ways of grounding, but you put yourself in direct contact with the earth. Now, sometimes individuals will ask me, "Well, can I ground on my back patio?" Well, the answer is, yeah, that's probably right, but it's not direct contact. Yes, the earth can probably, transmit or transfer electrons from your body, but the direct contact with the earth, I think, is the key, the critical aspect of it, because you're getting, I think, the best benefits of grounding.
Mm. And I think that includes soil, like you said, the beach, concrete. Does that include wood? I don't know.
Yeah, so wood, if you're wearing leather shoes, if you're on wood, all those things can give you the proper grounding effect. Rubber sole shoes are what you want to avoid. So, oftentimes people walk in rubber sole shoes or shoes that have rubber in them, or plastic covering, or whatever the
Hmm.
case may be. You want to avoid
Hmm.
that because that'll impede your grounding effect, or insulate you from the grounding benefit.
Okay. Now, from a scientific perspective, what is actually happening when we put our bare feet on the ground? Like, what's so great about it?
Well, the pure essence, and I think there are multiple factors that go into grounding that I emphasize with my patients. But in essence, the way I explain it to my patients, and I think from your audience would best understand, is think of the Earth as a large source of electrons. If we think about how antioxidant foods work, an antioxidant food, when you consume it, or an antioxidant source, to say that maybe it'd be a supplement or food, when you consume it, it stabilizes unstable molecules in your body known as free radicals. And free radicals are unstable because they lack an electron. They lack a free electron. So when an antioxidant donates an electron to a free radical, it stabilizes it. Now, you
Hmm.
want
Hmm.
a balance of antioxidants and free radicals in your body. And oftentimes in our day to day life, the foods we consume with the preservatives and animal protein, our environments increase EMF in our environments, and the like. We build up a lot of free radicals, a lot of these unstable molecules. You can refer to them as toxins. So, in the context of that, we develop what we call increased oxidative stress as an unbalance. Increase, free radicals, decrease antioxidants to stabilize the free radicals. So you have an ongoing process of degeneration, or I should say, accelerated degeneration of your organ systems, cells, and tissues. So it's almost like a smoldering fire. That's a biochemical fire that's in
Hmm.
your body. So when you have antioxidants on board, you're donating electrons to these free radicals. therefore stabilizing them. And then you're decreasing that oxidative stress. You're bringing things into balance. So back to earthing or grounding, the more you're in contact with the earth, the more you're grounding, you are bringing an antioxidant effect by the unlimited electrons stored in the earth that's being transmitted, and these free radicals are being stabilized. And we bring in free radicals on a regular basis. I mean, we're sitting at computers and we may exercise or different things that we do in our life, build up free radicals. So there's a constant need to stabilize them in addition to free radicals that are built up excessively over time. So that's the number
Yeah.
one characteristic of grounding that I like to emphasize. It's a source of electrons donated from the earth to the body to help stabilize these free radicals and therefore decrease oxidative stress.
I love that. I love the way you explained it because I feel like it's very simple and easy to understand. And I also feel like, I don't know, I feel like somebody should put this in a nutrition textbook that is an actual source. It should be like a source that you recommend to everyone. Literally, it's like get some more antioxidants from the ground,
That's
like
right.
not just
That's
our
right.
food.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that you point that out because, when we think of nutrition, quote unquote, we think of just physical substances that we put in our mouth, we chew, swallow, digest, and excrete. And that's
Yeah.
fine, but there are other forms of nutrition, other forms of ingesting things. And this grounding is a way of ingesting nutrients. I mean, these electrons are, in essence, a chemical substance, if you will, that comes into the body and has a biochemical effect. And if you think of food, they're chemical substances that are ingested that have a
Exactly.
biochemical effect.
Exactly. I think I might add that to my macronutrients list. um,
We all should.
can you can you break down for us, especially because you're a cardiologist, all of the and holistic healer, all of the things that that grounding does for our blood circulation, which in turn can also affect heart health and other things.
Sure, sure. They've done studies where you look at someone who's done, pre and post grounding, and you look at the pre and post grounding effect. So they would have someone who sleeps on a grounding sheet or grounding pad. And I think some of the studies, it varies in duration, but it may be for a period of a month or whatever the case is. And they look at blood coagulopathy and really the fluidity of blood, so rheology. So the thicker the blood is, the increased rheology, the thickness that it has. The thinner and more fluid it is, the lower the rheology. So we've seen that you have a lower blood rheology and a lower stickiness of the blood with increased grounding, increased sleeping on grounding pads, grounding sheets, and the like. That is a critical cardiovascular effect because flow. One of the main functions of the heart is circulation, and the global measurement of circulation of the heart is what we call cardiac output. Cardiac output is just the flow of blood, units of volume over time, the amount of blood that's circulated in volume over a unit period of time. And so the more the heart is able to circulate blood over time, more effectively it is, the better off our cardiovascular function is in general from a
Mm,
foundational standpoint.
mm,
So there are a lot of things that affect that cardiac output of flow. And one of those things is resistance to flow. So if you think about resistance to flow, if the arteries are dilated, then that decreases resistance. If they're restricted, that increases resistance. But there's also the characteristic of the substance that's flowing. So if you're imagining if you were trying to maybe push through a plunge, if you will, a liter of water through a tube versus
hmm
plunging a liter of molasses through a tube. Maybe we'll say molasses in the summertime. And then the third example is molasses in the wintertime.
Right.
You can imagine that it's easier to plunge water through a tube than molasses in the summertime, and even harder to plunge molasses through the wintertime. So blood that has increased rheology is like the molasses in the summertime, and more so the molasses in the wintertime. And so if
Mm,
what grounding does, with decreasing the rheology, it takes you from molasses in the wintertime to molasses in the summertime to the water. So the flow goes through more easily and
Mm.
therefore decreases stress on the heart, decreases afterload, and therefore allows your cardiac output to work more effectively with less stress and strain on what we call the myocardium or heart muscle itself.
Mm. Mm. Good stuff. Good stuff.
And we
Yeah.
also know that a plant-based diet does the same thing. And
Mm-mm.
so, if you know, when someone goes from an animal protein rich diet to a plant based diet, the fluidity of the blood decreases. And it may be the common denominator, may be the antioxidant effect that's happening in the blood itself. There could be other things at play as well.
No, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. I've also seen people talking about, so you talked about oxidative stress. Grounding decreases overall inflammation, which is useful for so many chronic conditions. But then people also talk about the effect on the emotions. I don't know if there's any studies on that, but they do say that in a sense, it can also relieve inflammation that's coming from an emotional state that is agitated. And I don't know exactly why from a scientific perspective.
Yeah, the connection with the emotion, there, I don't think we fully, well, I certainly don't fully understand all the connections. What I can say from my clinical experience is the following. We clearly see when we get our patients who are on a standard lifestyle, if you will, and we get them on a plant-based diet, we clearly see that emotionally they're much better. Um, for instance, and although these are anecdotal, quote unquote, but there are a large number of anecdotes. It's one thing to hear, a story told once, but a story told a million times, there's some data there. But the point I'm
Right.
making is simply this. We clearly see from an emotional standpoint, when people consume an increased antioxidant diet, I'll put it that way, stress is reduced, um, they're calmer, and patient report. For instance, one patient said, "I have a greater sense of euphoria." One person,
Wow, that's so
I
specific.
recall one patient, and these are just a few out of many, who when she taught school, and so she was on a detox diet. I remember she was in the office, and she was in the room, exam room. My medical assistant was checking the blood pressure. It was 105 over 65, and heart rate 68 or whatever. And she was just
Hmm.
lying there, calm and smiling. I said, "Well, how was your day?" She said it was horrible. I said, "What happened?" And she went down this whole list of crazy things that happened to her all day. But she was very calm. The point I'm making is simply this: the external stress triggers were not removed, but her internal response to those triggers were changed such that she was adapted to them better. And so when we
Yeah.
talk about the whole aspect of stress, I, and when I counsel my patient on global lifestyle things, we do say, okay, look, reduce those stress triggers as much as you can. Get the crazy people out of your life, whatever the case is. However, if you nourish the body biochemically from the inside, even though you can't immediately remove those external triggers, you will adapt to them better. So you can
Yeah.
start from your internal source of health. So
Yeah.
increasing antioxidants, I think, has an important impact. So to your point about relief of stress, grounding, I think, has an impact on that. Some books that I've read that talks about grounding, some studies, and they have anecdotes of mothers who are holding their babies who are crying in stress. When they walk out and they're walking on the ground, the baby settles down, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
There are a lot of
Yeah.
factors that are involved there, but I think
Mm.
that has some impact on stress.
No, for sure. I love how you talked about it dealing with stress from the biochemical internal point, and then from my perspective, the habits, because some people need a buffer, right? So if you have the habit of going straight on social media, you don't pray, you don't meditate, you don't do anything to calm yourselves down
That's
on
right.
a regular basis every single day, that's another thing that contributes to that long-term stress thing. Because some people really are more sensitive to stress. At least I've noticed
Mhm.
that some of my clients, it's almost like it's like the stress goes straight through them and it just causes disease and inflammation and all this stuff. So they need to create a wall around themselves every day by doing certain habits. And then, like you said, controlling what's going on in the inside with your food, your grounding, whatever else you got to do.
Yeah, and I like your point about meditating and praying because, again, we're talking about nutrition as substances that we ingest, but think meditating and praying, that's a source of ingestion. It's a spiritual and mental ingestion. And so when
Hmm.
we think about when I talk on the page about global wellness and we talk about ingestion, there's a physical food, there's an intellectual food, and then there's a spiritual food. And so that
Yeah.
whole aspect of taking those things out, like getting off social media and the TV and all that,
Yeah.
it makes a big difference.
Big difference. I had a Chinese medicine doctor tell me that immunity and resilience are tied together, but because of what you let in. And she was just talking about making sure that you don't just let all kinds of communication, music, TV, all these things just come into your space. In the sense you're not protecting your immunity when you do that. So you
Yeah,
have to be selective about what you're going to consume. Like you said, it's not just the, consumption through the mouth.
no, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Um, cool. Can you break down for us your amazing, just quickly, I know it's probably longer than, but your food classification system. I know we talked a little bit about it last time, but I think it's a really interesting and good thing for people to understand when they're considering detoxifying their diet or, of healing from any sort of issue.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'll start from 30,000 feet and kind of come in, and the gist
Okay.
of it is simply this: um, the foods that we ingest, and I'm going to isolate the physical foods, are going to be based on the fundamental aspects of those foods and what happens to those foods before you ingest them. So, one principle we looked at, and based on the studies, and this is an evolving process, if you will. So, if you ask me what the classification system is today, maybe 5 years from now, that may be some other characteristics. But the gist of it is the following: the fundamental aspects of the characteristics of food, if you look at plant origin, animal origin, or inorganic origin, we found that the plant origin sources are superior. And I'm not going to try to belabor you with the details of that. The data suggests that, but it just to make a quick argument, because you may have some, people who are paleo or whatever the case is. But if you make, and I'll make a simple argument in terms of the superiority of plant foods. Let's say, for instance, we take all of the so-called healthy diets. Maybe you call it Mediterranean, paleo, uh, whatever, South Beach, and vegan. The common denominator of all of those healthy diets are plant foods. So if we say that all of those healthy diets have some benefit, then I would argue that the sine qua non of every healthy diet are plant foods. So based on just
Hmm.
that simple argument, I can say that plant foods are the superior food because they're at least the foundation or the common denominator of every healthy diet that we know of. If we just concede that all
Hmm.
these diets are healthy, I'm not going to get into the argument, but just that simple component, I think we're there. So then the next step is that what happens to the foods before you consume them? It's one thing to say, okay, broccoli is healthy, but let's say, for
Hmm.
instance, you take the broccoli, you deep fry it and dip it in cyanide and then eat it. You say, well, wait a minute, it was healthy at the beginning, but then
Right.
something happened to that food before you consumed it that then changed its course from healthy to unhealthy. You follow me? So
Hmm.
it's not enough to
Hmm.
say, well, okay, eat plant foods, but we must say, okay, what has happened to those plant foods before you've
Hmm.
consumed them? And if you look at those two premises, you have the foundation of the meaning behind the food classification system. Now, if you get into the food classification system itself, we start to say, okay, plant foods first, minimally processed plant foods second, and then when we process them, the least egregious form of processing is going to be the third characteristic. Now, what we did is levels in this of 0 to 10 classification system. Level 0, raw liquefied plant foods. 10, the most toxic processed animal proteins known to man, and everything else in between, the healthiest to the least healthy. So if you go from 0, and we recommend no more than level 6, that's where plant foods end. So from 0 to 6 is
Mm,
what we recommend. Starting at 0 is raw liquefied food, cold pressed juices, smoothie foods, water, maybe some herbal teas, not steep greater than 100 degrees. I'm gonna get to that in a minute as to why that's the number. That's the healthiest. One, two, and three are raw solid foods. One low
mhm,
glycemic index, three high glycemic index, two in the middle. Level four is a
mhm,
transition zone from raw to minimally heated.
mhm,
4A is high fat content raw foods. 4B are dehydrated foods. 4C is where you begin to add a little bit of heat, slight blanching. 5 and 6 are boiled and steamed to higher degrees, etc. 6 has some dry heated foods compared to 5. And that's it in a
mm,
nutshell.
mm.
The reason I have
Wow, super
liquefied
cool.
foods and 0, and many people, my colleagues sometimes argue, well, cold pressed juices, you got it full of sugars and this, that, and the other. If you have a cold pressed juice, I think it's a completely different animal than a processed juice that's pasteurized. And we
Mhm,
have a fair amount of data on many of our patients who consume cold pressed juices and smoothies, and they do very well, including diabetics, with among whom people argue don't tolerate these foods very well. The reason I gave
mm,
liquefied raw plant foods a higher ranking than solids, even though I think inherently it's probably better to chew your foods. Uh, the classification system takes into context someone who's ill. So, for instance, and again, my perspective
yeah,
coming into here is really sick patient. I've had a patient on a ventilator whom I've given food through a peg tube and detoxed and gotten off the ventilator and walked out of the hospital. You can't
yes,
put fresh broccoli through a feeding tube. You have to
yeah,
liquefy the food and put it through there. And
yes,
so, and even people who are not intubated, I mean, people with irritable bowel syndrome, people with poor dentition. I had a recent patient who was following a whole food plant based diet for 3 years,
mm,
no oil, but he was microwaving a lot of his food, cooking at almost everything because he had very poor dentition. He had
mm,
extremely bad coronary disease. His on a whole food plant based diet for 3 years. His angina did not improve a little bit, but not significant. When I put him on
mm,
cold pressed juices, smoothies, a few soft raw foods like avocados, in a very short period of time, his inflammatory markers went down. His angina had nearly completely gone away, and I think his coronaries are opening up. We're still working with him, but there was a big difference when we put him from,
mhm,
he was level 6, 100%. We took him to level 0, and we
mm,
saw
mm.
a night and day difference. We've seen this over 2 decades in terms of the differential.
Yes, yes.
And we've
No,
published our data looking at this with this classification system.
yeah, that was my next question was related to the stories that you're telling because I feel like I've heard amazing stories from you about patients and your I have never heard anyone else this is me. I've never heard anyone else talk about addressing terminally ill patients in the way that you do and I don't know why. I just feel like there needs to be I feel like your contributions need to be more known and there needs to be more people doing this. But can you explain to some degree? I know that it's nuanced because you have all kinds of people coming with all kinds of conditions. Like, what is your approach to terminal illness?
No, I'm glad you're pointing that out because I agree with you 100%. And the reason is the following. And this has become more on my frontal consciousness, if you will, in the last, I would say, 6 to 9 months than ever before, despite the fact I've been doing this for a long time. And I'll give you a few examples to really highlight why. So recently, I began taking care of a patient of mine, severe heart failure, bad mitral valve regurgitation. I admitted to the hospital for one of my colleagues to evaluate her to do what we call a mitral valve clip to improve her mitral valve leakage, to improve her heart function, etc. She had several episodes in the hospital where her condition deteriorated rapidly. We put her in the ICU. We turned her around. We put her on dialysis. She became acidotic, lots of acid building up in her blood. And so it was a back and forth with struggling with her. And so my colleague saw her and said, look, she's so bad off. We can't do anything for her. Let's just put on end of care. She was
Mm,
also a candidate for biventricular pacing, which is something that can improve the heart function. I talked to a colleague of mine, and as electrophysiology, I used to do my own. I have a colleague that do them for me now, and I had her see her. She said, well, look, she's too far gone. So I went to
Mm.
the patient room and she was crying. So, they told me I'm not going to survive. And, we had palliative care see her. Says, I'm going to order my last meal. And so I said, look, shut up. You're not going to have your
Lord have
last meal.
mercy.
We're going to detox you. She was on a Milanone infusion in the hospital. So I put on a
Hmm.
raw detox. I put on smoothies with superfoods in them. I added super green to it, blue green algae. And in 7 days, I was able to wean her from the Milanone. And we sent her
My
out
God.
on a superfood smoothie raw detox. And she continued to
Mm.
improve. Now, there's a
Mm.
struggle because the patient psychologically, they wax and wane, and we're working with it, but she's still improving. Now, this is someone who is
Mm.
terminally ill and everyone had given up on. I use her as
Mm.
an example for the following reason. And there are other examples of patients. Another patient, let me just tell about him real quick, and I'm going to use both of them as a
Hmm.
pair, who came in with a heart attack. And so he was in an outside hospital that I don't go to. And it was a weekend. A cardiologist cathed him and saw he had multiple vessels that were diseased. There was one vessel causing a heart attack. It was a small vessel. But he felt the patient should go for emergency bypass surgery. The family didn't want that. They got in touch with me through my answering service, and I was able to transfer him to my hospital. And I talked to my surgical colleagues. We agreed, look, let's let him wait. Let's give him intravenous heparin, let him cool off, etc. So, unbeknownst, well, you know, against our desire, the patient left against medical advice within about 24, 36 hours being in the hospital. So he left the hospital of our care, and he came back with about 6 or 8 hours in cardiogenic shock, blood pressure low, in bad shape. So you put him back in.
Oh.
Of course, nobody wanted to touch him then. So I talked to the daughter and the family. I said, look, we need to treat him aggressively. We want to detox him. So I put him on a detox. So here's someone in the face of a heart attack, too sick for surgery, too sick for angioplasty, but not too sick for raw detox. So we detox him. His blood pressure
Huh.
improved. He improved, got him out of the hospital. He's now going through the process of detox, and we're treating him effectively. So those two examples, where an aggressive nutritional intervention was ideal for the patient, where the surgical intervention or medical intervention in some cases were not only were they not adequate, but they were too dangerous. The point to be taken
Yes.
away from this is the following. Ultimately, for someone to improve, is your body. Your body's going to be responsible for healing itself. I don't
Yeah.
care if I'm a cardiologist or a surgeon, I can't operate on you if your body's too weak. And if I
Yes.
do operate on you, it's going to be up to your body to recover from both the operation and the illness that I'm operating on.
Mm.
And so in those cases, the body had to recover from the illness, and they were too ill to get the treatment. So therefore, it only had to overcome the illness. I have a similar situation with some cancer patients with supporting. Cancer patients, they get all the chemotherapy, it ravages the body, and then the body has to not only overcome the cancer, it's overcome the cancer and the treatment. Keep in mind, the number one cause of death, heart disease, cancer, and medical treatment. So if you're treating heart disease and cancer, you already have number one and number two. The medical treatment's number three cause. So the body has to
Exactly.
overcome two enemies. And I'm not criticizing the treatments, but it's just that that's a reality. So as I said, as I've thought through this over the last 9 months, optimal nutrition, or I should say optimal body enhancement through nutritional means, has to at the very least be part of the whole regimen, if not the sole regimen in of itself.
Ugh, preach to the choir. Okay.
Sorry if I went on, but this has been something that's actually been on my mind, and you kind of struck a nerve there. But anyway, sorry.
Well, related to your comments about medical treatment, which were very poignant, your practice started in 1997, so it's almost like a quarter of a century you've been doing this. How have your views on medicine changed? In short summary, I feel like you have a lot that you could say about that, but I guess what are some
Yeah,
of your core things that have changed for you?
gosh, oh my goodness, it's in short, the things that we do that we think we're doing for patients in this typical medical treatment are more things that we're doing to patients than for them. That's number one.
Mm.
Number two is that in the same time we're doing these things to our patients, we are ignoring, and perhaps I should say, depriving them of the optimal things that we should be doing for them.
Mm.
And that is helping them achieve biochemical and physiological balance through optimal nutrition, fresh air, sunshine, and all of these other modalities that are really necessary.
Mm. Hmm.
Hope that summarized
Um,
enough. I could have gone on, but anyway.
I know. And we had a side conversation about this, so I do want to talk about this just briefly, whatever you feel like saying. But what do you believe that what doctors and health professionals say to their patients matter and how they say it?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. you know, the answer is yes. And the follow up to that is simply this. One thing I've become too aware of over the last number of years, maybe the last decade, is that we are in the medical community, we are extremely pessimistic to our patients.
Mm.
We
Mm.
will come into a patient and we will emphasize the fact that you're going to die. For example, one of my patients told me
Oh.
she went to see some physician, and she has a condition where she has a neurological brain abnormality that predisposes to bleeding. She has a history of an arrhythmia that predisposes to stroke. So
Mm-hmm.
she should be on a blood thinner, but she can't be because of the bleeding. And so she saw some neurologist. She says, "Well, you're going to have a stroke in the next year, and you're going to be paralyzed." So,
Oh my God.
I mean, some kind of a sage. I mean, that we're never we're always sage of doom and gloom, but we're never sage
Oh
of
my God.
bright and sunny. But it's seriously, it's always, oh, you have heart failure. Oh, you're gonna die. But there was a 42-year-old young man I was treating bad heart failures, from out of state, and he said, "Look, they said we can just put an LVAD in you and make you comfortable, but you're gonna die soon." And I went and talked to them. I was matter of fact about it. So look, we're going to do this, this, and this, and we're going to, get you feeling better in this stage. And he and his wife just broke down, started crying,
My
and
God.
it just struck me at the time. So, well, wait a minute, what's going on? What did I say? And it was just tears of joy because they had gone through so much of negativism. And one thing that I realized as a patient I see, I commend them on their bravery because they've been told, they've been beaten down with negative. Yeah, you're gonna die. You're sick. This is terrible. You're horrible.
Mm.
And it's that in and of itself is bad medicine because that, I mean, my goodness, if you
Yeah.
tell someone they're gonna die every day, well, pretty soon you're gonna be right if you get them to believe
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
so what I do in my practice, I encourage a patient, look, hey, you're gonna be fine. And the other thing I try to do with them, I try to make wisecracks to make them laugh. And
Right.
so largely it makes me laugh, it makes them laugh. I enjoy it, they enjoy it. We'll come out feeling better. And I think it enhances the overall well being.
Yeah, so good, so good. The pessimism thing, I also think that has to do with the focus, which I think you alluded to earlier, which is if you're focused on treating disease and you're not focused on the promotion of health, we got a problem because then you're going to be pessimistic.
That's
Because
right.
then you're
That's
like
right.
looking at these diagnoses and you're like, you got this, you got this, you got this. Sorry, you're gonna die,
That's right. That's right.
Meanwhile, the health promoters are like, well, if we use some green juice and if we use this, you should be all right,
I
Um,
like the way you say that because I mean that's an important point that I think your audience need to grab a hold of. We focus
mm,
on treating disease and in medicine managing the disease. So, I mean, and just think of, you got a patient over here, you got a disease over here, and the doctor's all looking over here. Yeah, we got to manage this. And the patient's all over there, all alone, and we're managing their
yeah,
disease. They got the and it's really a crazy thing because uh, the disease we should ignore. The disease is just a manifestation of the patient's life biochemistry being off balance. We should
yes,
really ignore that, whatever that diagnosis is, and go to the
yes,
foundation of the patient and heal them.
yes. Oh, so good. Yes. So what's going on at Montgomery Heart and Wellness? What are some changes? What are some programs you have going on that people can join?
Well, so we've taken our program online. We have the Healthy Lifestyle Series program. If you go to online.montgomeryhart.com, Healthy Lifestyle Series, or just go to montgomeryhart.com, you can see all the information about all of our programs. But the Healthy Lifestyle Series is an excellent program that we have. It allows people from anywhere in the country, the world, to come and get access to our benefits. It's a program that starts off with 5 sessions over 4 weeks. It includes myself and my health and wellness team. We actually coach individuals through a detox process at whatever stage or level they want to go through. That's one. Two, we also give them information about healthy lifestyle techniques. It includes a nutrition plan we work them through. There's a fitness plan we put them into. We have videos of a trainer give them different information on fitness tips. We will also give them information on detoxing their environment, reducing EMF, grounding techniques, and the like. And so all of this is put in the context of a coaching series of 5 sessions over 4 weeks. That's the jump start. However, beyond that, once that time is done, they have access to all of that material, which is a lot more than they can go through in a month over the course of a year. Every month, they can check in with one of our health and wellness coordinators twice a month with questions or comments or insight that they need, and we can help them address that. So, we're following throughout the course of a year through that Healthy Lifestyle Series. There's also an elite coaching program. Some individuals, they want to work with me directly, more closely. That elite coaching program gives them 4 sessions directly with me where I may individualize the care. Some people may have more complex medical issues. I may have to review their medical chart and things like that. So the elite coaching program
And that's
gives them
online?
that. That's online, and that's done through like Zoom interactions. The coaching is done through Zoom coaching online, and that can be done online as well. It's not medical, but I do look at all the medical or whatever issues they want me to help address. Now, then with
Okay.
that program, they also have a lifetime access to the Healthy Lifestyle Series, and we also have an online independent health and wellness course that people can buy independently, or if they buy the Healthy Lifestyle Series, they have access to that. And the Elite course have access to both of those programs for a lifetime. And so we have all of these areas where people can access us remotely. Of course, we have patients who fly in from all over the place who come to see us. They may have cancer or heart disease. They may stay in the area for about 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes longer. And that's where we do integrate the medical side to things. We do nutritional support for cancer patients. We're adding to our healing modalities. We will be installing infrared sauna therapy this week. In fact, we have some cancer patients we're working with, heart failure patients we're working with, and probably in the next few months we'll have hyperbaric oxygen therapy to add to like our IV vitamin infusions, our nutrition center, and the like. So that's what's new
Love
at
it.
Gamer Heart Wellness.
Love it. Where can people find you on the socials?
So the best way is through our website, which has all of our social links, and it is
Okay.
montgomeryheart.com. That's the easiest thing to mention. We're on. We have a YouTube channel that they can go through YouTube. I don't have that handle memorized, but our link to our YouTube channel is right there, big and bold on our which we recently relaunched our website. So montgomeryheart.com. It gives you easier access to all of our new programs and all of our social media handles. And so that's why I don't have to remember so many handles. Okay, montgomeryheart.com. And right there, it gets you to all of the programs. With a flash screen, it gets you everything you need to know on that homepage.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Montgomery. This has been an awesome conversation as always.
Yep, I agree as always. I really thanks. These are great questions. You really got me thinking.
No problem.